The Hulk and Wolverine fight Hulkverine in this comic, and Wolverine becomes the Hulk, which is crazy, all kinds of Hulk madness. So this opens up with a guy named Clayton Cortez, and undoubtedly you guys are asking yourselves, who in the world is Hulkverine? Clayton Cortez is Hulkverine. He's basically the result of splicing the DNA of the Hulk and the DNA of Wolverine into one person, and then giving that person adamantium. And there's other members of Weapon X thrown in there, Domino and so on and so forth. But in essence, he has an adamantium skeleton with Wolverine's adamantium claws and basically the unlimited strength of the Hulk. This dude is nuts. Like, it's absolutely amazing. I love his character. Most of his stories are trash, but this one is not. So the cool thing here is that with this guy, they're watching everything taking place during Immortal Hulk. Now, we did cover Immortal Hulk, and this is kind of like the big battle that took place between the Immortal Hulk and the Avengers, which we only got glimpses of. But basically, he dominated the Avengers completely because Immortal Hulk is amazing. But the cool thing here is that once he gets back to his house with his family, he starts like sneezing and whatnot, which should never happen. He's demonstrating all the symptoms of a cold or some kind of a virus. A person with a healing factor would never get that. And so right off the bat, they realize something's wrong. Now, the reason why this matters is because ever since Clayton Cortez's original appearance and Weapons of Mutant Destruction from Totally Awesome Hulk and the old Weapon X comics, up until about now, he's been hunted by a variety of different companies, all of which are trying to use him for their own ends. Roxxon Corporation, Weapon X is always trying to get their hands back on him again, kind of like a modern day Wolverine in a lot of ways. And so he basically sends his family into hiding. But once they're gone, Bruce Banner shows up, and Bruce Banner runs into him, and he literally asks him, he's like, Clayton Cortez, and like Clayton doesn't say anything, and he's like, whatever, I know who you are, I'm Bruce Banner, I'm the Hulk. And he's like, you stole my powers. Now, one of the things to know is that at the time that this was going on, Amadeus Cho was the main Hulk, and Wolverine was actually dead. He had been dead ever since the events of the death of Wolverine when he was encased in adamantium. So both of these guys don't really know the ins and outs of Clayton Cortez. The reality is that he just kind of had their DNA spliced onto him, but they think he stole their abilities. And that's why there's a kind of back and forth that goes on here, because Bruce Banner's done enough to know about this guy's backstory, right? He was like, you basically worked with Eagle Star, you associated with multiple massacres on 3 different continents, and then you got picked up by Weapon X, who turned you into Weapon H, the Hulkverine, and then you got even worse. And the response of Clayton, like, that is, I'm not what you think. And the response of Banner, that's what I used to say. And so when the question's asked, like, what do you want? The response of Banner is like, I'm here to stop you, right? He's there to try to talk reason into him and try to get him to understand like the error of his ways and so on and so forth. Now, by this point in time, Clayton's turned over a new leaf, right? He's no longer a mercenary. He's back with his family. He's got his whole thing going on. But the cool thing here is that once he starts to sneeze, Banner realizes there's something off about this guy, that he shouldn't necessarily be doing that. But Clayton just pops his claws and goes after Banner. And then Banner's like, look, man, we tried to talk about it, right? I tried to talk to you about it. I tried to use logic and reason, but you didn't want to listen. So now the other guy, my friend, is gonna have to help you understand your place in the bigger picture. Hulk manifests and the battle is on. And it's crazy because like they're evenly matched. Basically, right? They are evenly matched. Now, the big difference between the two, and this is one of the things that was kind of finicky about Clayton Cortez, we never got any like Planet Hulk or World War Hulk type storylines for him. So we never really saw like the full totality of what he was capable of. More so than that, this is the first time in Marvel Comics that he's fighting the traditional Incredible Hulk and Wolverine. That was the whole basis behind the Hulkverine story. We had never really seen this before. Now, there is also the leader who's watching this unfold. The guy does play a role, but we'll keep it to a minimum because in all honesty, you guys don't care about the leader. Nobody cares about the leader. The leader doesn't even care about the leader, right? This guy's almost as useless as Black Bolt from the Inhumans. But one of the things that the Incredible Hulk had the ability to do during Immortal Hulk, we should really just call him Immortal Hulk because that's what he is. One of the things he had the ability to do was siphon off gamma radiation from other people. And that's what he starts doing to Clayton, right? Like sucking the gamma radiation out of his body. But he unwittingly ends up picking up whatever it was that Clayton had. But one of the things the leader tells us is that he essentially infected Clayton with a kind of gamma irradiated virus, which has now been passed on to the Hulk. It's not going to make any difference in the story, so I don't even know why this was even being mentioned in the first place. Clayton does come across the leader not knowing who he is. Of course, the leader is like the smartest enemy of the Incredible Hulk, one of his longest running enemies, but like, who cares? Because like no one's here to see the leader. The bigger thing is that Clayton just like chases after the guy, and the leader ultimately gets away. But in the midst of that, Clayton looks around because this like disembodied voice, he's like, normally I don't butt in on someone else's fight like this, but I'll make an exception for chumps who are biting my style, right? So like, now Wolverine's here. And so now Clayton has to contend with Wolverine. And here's the question that I would ask you guys, right? I want to know your all stance on this. Who would you rather fight if you had to fight one? The Hulk or Wolverine? Because yes, Wolverine is just a dude with a healing factor and some claws, but lest we forget, he's got his berserker rage, and that can trump the power of the Hulk depending on the circumstance and who's writing the story. But as it stands, the two of them are just kind of going back and forth with one another. There is a little more talking here than you would traditionally see, and a lot of it's just kind of like Clayton explaining what's going on and Wolverine just being like, I'm aware of what's going on. He's like, you've been running around with those claws looking like me. I got my own body count. I don't appreciate being blamed for yours, and yada, 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 that kind of thing. But basically the conversation that he had with Banner. And then the fight's on, right? Like Clayton immediately like just lunges at this guy, plunges his claws through Wolverine, and Wolverine's just kind of like, okay, right? And so like Wolverine pops his claws and goes after this guy. Now, this is the big difference between these guys, right? And it's why the fight is so interesting here. Wolverine's been around for an incredibly long time, right? A couple hundred years by this point. So he's the best there is at what he does, according to himself, right? And then the Hulk is just, it speaks for itself, right? Just unbridled rage in a physical form that's green. Clayton does not have the experience of either, but he does have his own experience as basically a killing machine. So it's kind of cool to see these guys going back and forth and fighting in this way, because unlike Bruce Banner and really just the Hulk persona, the Hulk, like once he manifests, it's just kind of savage in nature, right? Immortal, that kind of thing, and just attacking. Wolverine is more inclined to listen to reason, especially because of the empathy side of things. And literally Clayton tells him like, my family's in danger, I have to get out of here. And Wolverine's like, your family, right? And that leads to like Clayton going after the leader and all his guys. Now, of course, the leader teleports out, and then the Hulk shows up while Clayton's about to kill like all these henchmen, and like the Hulk incapacitates the guy because he literally says like, you're going after a whole bunch of shadow-based guys. That's my job. Now, Shadow Base is from Immortal Hulk and really just from the Incredible Hulk mythos. But the idea of Shadow Base is exactly what it sounds like, right? Just a kind of shadow clandestine organization operating under the radar, government sanctioned, going after the Incredible Hulk consistently, right? So it's really, really cool, interesting part of the Immortal Hulk mythos. But even though Hulk manages to momentarily get the upper hand on Clayton, this leads to Wolverine picking him up, throwing him on a motorcycle, and getting out of there, because he literally tells him, like, you're sick. You cannot beat the Hulk. That's not going to happen. If you stay here and you fight him, he's going to tear you apart piece by piece. You being sick, it's going to make you slow. And when you fight the Hulk, you need every ounce of strength and speed that you can possibly muster. And so one of the things he says is that when Clayton's like, why are you helping me? He's like, because you said the leader was after your family. Call me sentimental, but that kind of pisses me off, right? And then you basically get a point where the leader ends up running into Dr. Alba, the one that originally made Clayton Cortez, and they don't become important until later, right? What is important here is that once they all kind of start putting notes together, right, especially Wolverine and Clayton, Wolverine deduces the fact that someone lured them all together, right? That it couldn't just been the leader. Somebody else had to be working alongside the leader, which of course we know that to be Dr. Alba at this point. But it's him just kind of realizing they didn't just happen to run into each other. Somebody's instigating this conflict, right? And even Wolverine himself, having just recently come back, didn't know anything about Clayton, and just word had kind of reached his ears that like some guy with adamantium claws is killing people out there. So he started asking questions of the people that they knew, and the answers started coming suspiciously fast. And so that's where he's like, okay, somebody was feeding me the information that I wanted to know. And that led to this whole thing. The other part of that is like, Hulk just comes barreling through, right? Literally just comes barreling through and running. And so even with Clayton Cortez intending to take off, the response of Wolverine is, no, the Hulk's after something. If the Hulk was after you, he would have just stopped here and just started attacking us. But there's something else that has his attention and something else that he's going after. We got to find out what this guy knows. The issue is that as they get to where the Hulk is, the sun's kind of rising. And even he asks, like, what are you doing here, right? Wolverine says, like, I came here hunting Weapon H, like, just like you, but now I'm starting to wonder. And then, like, the Hulk freaks out, right? He's like, he just turns into, like, Anakin Skywalker at the end of episode 3, right? Like, you were with him, right? Just, like, lashing out, right? And everybody's just kind of like, Banner, calm down, man. Like, you're not thinking straight. And he was like, get off me, right? And just goes after this guy. Even when Wolverine tries to tell him, hey, man, like, it's not what you think, the response of Banner is, I don't care. Banner leaps into the air, but because of the sunrise, immediately goes back into his human state, which is part of the Immortal Hulk run, right? He like becomes the Hulk at night. It was a really, really cool blend of like the Moon Knight type mythos, right? Where like he gains his abilities, or at least it enhances what he can do when it's the full moon, different things along those lines, you know, at nighttime and so on and so forth. But the Immortal Hulk run was very much designed, and in a lot of ways kind of felt like a horror Hulk type of run. So that's why all that stuff becomes important. But we end up finding out that like Clayton's family is actually just kind of staying in an underwater base. And he brings Banner and he brings Wolverine there. Because it's one of those things where it's kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Like something led us all together, right? Like the leader, whoever he is, because, you know, Clayton doesn't really know who this guy is. Like they all led us together. There's all a particular reason why they're doing this. What we end up finding out, and the main motivation here, was to instigate a fight between all three so that DNA could be taken. And when it was, they could actually modify and adjust the Hulk and Wolverine to turn them into their very own killing machines, which is kind of cool because as this goes on, like the group is just like attacked by just these giant henchmen, right? Who just start pummeling the vehicles, so on and so forth. They snatch up Banner, they snatch up Wolverine, and they basically teleport out, right? These guys disappear. So at that point, it's just Clayton there with his family trying to figure out what it is that they're going to do next. But for Wolverine and the Hulk, when they're teleported to the Shadow Base facility, they're just kind of immersed in these nanobots, more or less, that were created by the leader in Dr. Alba, which modifies them and just turns them into these raging beasts. Now, that's the technology that Dr. Alba originally used in the Weapons of Mutant Destruction, because one thing to know is that Clayton Cortez was the most successful, but there were a lot of other experiments, right? Robert Andrews, Dave Andrews, both of whom are brothers, people that came before that, just kind of like modifying individuals and trying to make the whole DNA merger work. 9 times out of 10 it didn't, right? Like I want to say it was Dave Andrews, where like he turned into the Hulk and like the skin just fell off of him. It was pretty rough. It was pretty wild and crazy looking. But in this instance, between the leader's intelligence and Dr. Alba's intelligence, as well as like the resources being merged, they're able to achieve their goal of creating a mindless but controllable Hulk and Wolverine, both of whom have adamantium claws and have identical powers, right? Unlimited strength. And so at that point, they're like, go out there and tear stuff up, right? Show us what you're capable of. And that's exactly what they do. They just start ripping things to pieces, just like tearing everything up. There even comes a point when like they look at each other and immediately just start fighting. And it's really dope. It's really, really cool. Because in the midst of all this, right, like an hour or so later, the Avengers show up on the scene. The problem is that these guys are fighting in what's basically a nuclear power plant. So the Avengers can't just like run in there, right? Lest they end up contracting nuclear radiation and then just spend the last few moments of their life suffering in agony as the skin falls off their bones. So they're kind of like, what do we do here? And that's when Clayton arrives on the scene and Clayton jumps in. So you get Hulkverine fighting a Hulk with adamantium claws and a Wolverine with Hulk's powers. So it's like Hulkverine versus Hulkverine versus Hulkverine. I don't know exactly how you would describe this, but it is dope. It's just like this gigantic 3-way battle between these guys. And it is intense. I mean, they're literally fighting for blood. Clayton is trying to like calm these down or try to talk some measure of reason into them. But at the same time, he's also kind of relishing the whole experience, right? Because in a lot of ways, it's his first time that he can really cut loose in any real situation, because he hasn't been able to do that for quite some time, right? The other thing about this is he realizes the leader and Dr. Alba are right over there watching the whole thing. So he charges after them, which in turn brings Wolverine and the Hulk along with him. He even like fires off one of his adamantium claws at these guys, which is pretty solid, because this is kind of like, damn, you're full of surprises. Like, this is pretty crazy. But Dr. Alba and the leader in turn see it as like a successful experiment. They reactivate the nanobots, and it basically shuts down the Hulk and Wolverine and their ability to be controlled. In turn, she points the nanobots back at Clayton, fires them off at him. But here's the kicker, right? This guy is just kind of like, yes, like your nanobots are what made me what I am, but they merge with me, right? I control them. They do not control me. I'm no longer a controllable creature. And so he's like, it doesn't work, right? Like when they literally just try to control this guy, it's like, not gonna work. And they basically teleport away, right? They teleport out of there as fast as they can because it's the only thing they can do. Of course, Banner and Wolverine end up emerging, you know, because they've kind of returned back to their normal selves, and the Avengers are like, hey man, it's cool, like we get what's going on, you know, everything's sorted out, and they kind of go on and do their own thing, and then the story basically wraps up from there. Kind of a weird moment. The leader and Dr. Alba make out, which is really strange. That guy's got an enormous head. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. It's a fun story, man. It's a fun story. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.